Welcome to the Diversity Connector podcast, where we explore the rich tapestry of human experiences. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and together as we dive into conversations that bridge cultures, challenge stereotypes, and celebrate the unique perspectives each of us brings to the table. Each episode is a journey through stories and insights from a kaleidoscope of voices, each sharing their colorful narrative. Whether you're at home, on the go, or just anywhere in between, you're now part of a community that values understanding, inclusivity, and the beauty of diversity. So plug in your headphones, get comfortable, and let's connect through the power of our shared stories. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the Diversity Connector podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Diversity Connector. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating guest. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Hi, my name is Kanchana Wickremasinghe. I am based out of Melbourne, Australia. As Richard said, it is a wonderful city to live in. And I think up until now, it's ranked one of the top cities top livable cities. So my story, I was born in Sri Lanka. I was raised in Sri Lanka until I finished my high school. During the time when I was finishing my high school, as most of you know, that Sri Lanka had the civil war. Sadly, that impacted a lot of the kids at my age coming out of high school, going into university. Universities were closed and things were getting delayed. And I was one of the lucky ones. I would say that my parents had some funds, not a lot. Actually, my dad spent his entire pension retirement to sponsor me to come and study in Australia, because he didn't want it for me to stop my higher education. I was passionate to study information technology or computer science, and at the time, there was few options obviously available outside of Sri Lanka. Australia was one of them. We also had some relatives, obviously, that who could help me to stay while I immediately moved. So ended up coming to Australia. So I came to Australia back in 1991 to study at Swinburne. I wouldn't say that was an easy thing as well. Obviously, first time living outside of Sri Lanka without any family. Well, we had some, distant relatives who could obviously help me as well. And honestly, they did this too, and they became very, very close friends and relatives to me. Yeah, and the 3 years I was here studying was a massive struggle as well in terms of um, having to pay the international student fees and obviously finding jobs. Australia also going through a tough time in terms of they had just come out of the 88, 87 market crash, and things weren't looking really, really good. Like I say to some of the kids today, they're actually pretty lucky because finding a part-time job these days is not as difficult. Obviously, of course, the student fee has gone really, really high up now. But even back then, paying $9,000 a year for student fees and covering your living expenses and finding a part-time job to do that was very difficult. Again, I got a little bit lucky. Actually, university professors at Swinburne, so uh, my contribution in terms of at the university as well as outside of the university, so they actually helped me to get a smaller grant that actually helped me to pay some of the fees. Um, So I finished my degree in 1993 and actually decided that I would return back to Sri Lanka because I had free education in Sri Lanka, and most of you know, high school and university education are free in Sri Lanka, while a lot of the people in there don't appreciate, how much money government like Sri Lanka actually spend to get that level of really good education. So I returned back and then started working. But I always had the passion of starting something myself. Even when I returned back, I didn't want to immediately actually go into the workforce. Somehow, this entrepreneur thing was in my blood. So I was kind of starting a couple of startups with a few of my friends. Then obviously, the financial pressure got to me again, and so they're probably having a 9 to 5 job. They actually pay, salary at the end of the month was something that I probably need. I can't put my, parents and others under that stress. So I actually, took a job. But sadly, Sri Lanka, with the civil war still continuing, really didn't get a chance to do a lot of major projects in Sri Lanka because the government didn't have funding to spend on larger IT projects. Private sector was also going very slow. I mean, having said that, I was involved in a couple of larger projects. Um, but from a career perspective, somebody who had learn a lot, I felt like if I stayed there, I'm actually going to be stagnated and probably not being able to contribute as much as I could. And obviously, there's a lot of politics as well as as you can imagine in doing work for government and government projects. I decided to take a 3 months contract in New Zealand. Um, that was once again a risk as well because the company hasn't actually offered me the job. They said they would love to interview you and you probably have the right skills. This was in Christchurch. I took a risk because I have never been to New Zealand. I thought, okay, if it turned out to be that they don't offer me the job, at least, with the savings I had, I could actually travel New Zealand and see whether this would be a country that I would actually come back. Luckily for me, I think they like what I was able to offer. So I joined a software company in Christchurch. I worked with them, but while working also, I don't know. It kept coming back to me saying, I got to do something on my own and actually prove the world that as a migrant into New Zealand, that I could also become successful, similar to how other startups starting in New Zealand. Yeah, so I did continue to work in Christchurch. And I got married to Shalini, went back to Sri Lanka to get married, and she came back as well. Um, she studied medicine, and so she had to again study exams in New Zealand. But by the time we left Christchurch to come to Wellington, she had partly finished her exams, and she was expecting as well with our first son, Kanishka. This was in 2001. And I did continue with my full-time job because I knew that I had to support my family and, we're expecting, a child as well. Yeah, and that all happened. I did continue on side projects to do a couple of startups with few of the friends in New Zealand as well as some migrants as well. Um, Initially, I didn't know that you have to raise funds and how to raise funds, etc. So I was kind of putting all my money to do these startups, and I can tell you from my experience, and actually, it's not easy, especially when you're a migrant in a country that you haven't lived for too long, starting something brand new and trying to convince the people, this is a good thing we should continue to do. I mean, when I look back today, of course, some of those things that we have started, even though that I wasn't able to raise funds and actually make it successful, they are actually happening in the industry, whether it is in New Zealand or elsewhere. So I look back and say, no, I wasn't really crazy. Those ideas, somebody else also had it, and at least they were able to, make it success. and I get my satisfaction from there. Obviously, that didn't pay my bills, but I say, that is still a good thing to look back and say, yes, you weren't really crazy because you were really onto something. So I continue to work in Wellington. I work for some of the larger multinationals, and we had our second child as well. And in between, Shalini managed to finish her medical exams and also got into work. And in 2005, I actually decided I was working for EDS back then, and that got acquired by HP few years later, as you may recall. EDS was a good employer. I learned a lot. And even today, when I talk to young entrepreneurs that they're not willing to go and work for an employer, I say actually it actually helps sometimes, not just to pay your bills, but you also find problems that are in the industry that actually might become your startup, and that's what happened to me as well. So I left EDS. Now at that point I could take a little bit of a risk because at least one of us is working so we can pay the bills. Obviously I did discuss this with my wife Shalini as well, and she was very supportive. She has been very supportive with all my startups as well. Startups where I actually had a decent exit, or startup I made a lot of losses. And obviously, I'll talk a little bit about the losses as well, and how that can be challenging and impacting your progress in your life and your family as well. Um, but yeah, in the startups that I did start in New Zealand, I have to kind of self-fund most of it. Back then, in around 2001, 2003, that time, it was very difficult to find investors. And if you knew investors, mostly they are connected. And I didn't have that kind of a connections. And a lot of obviously the Sri Lankan community or the migrant community, I mean, they were rich, high net worth individuals, but they were a handful, and I didn't have many connections to get funding. So pretty much all my startups in New Zealand were startups that I self-funded, um, and put money back from the revenue that we have generated out of those companies. Right. Around 2006-7, we were thinking of, kids were growing, and part of Shalini's family has moved to Australia, and Australia was where I was studying, and most of my friends were, and some of our distant relatives as well. So we thought it might be a good opportunity for us to move back to Australia, since kids haven't started school. Kanishka has started school, but he was still in the first year of primary, so it wouldn't impact his education. So we decided to move back to Australia. I think that was the right decision. I love New Zealand, by the way. If I wanted to go back and retire, I would definitely go back. Maybe not Wellington. As you get older, Wellington probably can become very windy and cold. But north part of South Island, the areas of Nelson, etc. I love that area. I mean, I still love Christchurch as well. Um, but yeah, it's not because I didn't love the country to move here. And a lot of people from New Zealand who has come to Australia or gone to other countries would say that it's a fantastic country, and it also gives you an opportunity to look beyond things that you could do. Um, but as a migrant, it comes with quite a bit of challenges as well. I wouldn't say that I was discriminated in any ways. But that said, I guess I got lucky, but there were a lot of other migrants actually finding difficulty finding jobs, even with um, really really good skills and experience. And New Zealand was a little bit too close in terms of looking at people with experience outside of New Zealand. They were looking at people, whether you had New Zealand experience, whether you had worked in other New Zealand companies. I think that things have changed a lot since the last 20 years or so. They are very much more open, I would imagine now. Yeah, so back in 2007, I decided to come to Australia, left all my jobs, so I didn't have a full-time job as such. Obviously Shalini had a contract that she could work with, so we still had some opportunity to pay our bills. Right. So I continue to work with a couple of startups, and some of them I lost a lot of money. So when I guess some of the challenges and mistakes when I look back, I would say it's not that I couldn't find money for the startups. It is probably the people that you work with um, can also be very challenging. You do need to find the right people with the right balance, etc., for your startup to be successful, whether you raise money or not. I think that is something important that we have to realize. Um, and again, even in Australia back in 2007, 2008 timeframe, there were not a lot of uh, the investors in Australia. I think that has changed significantly over the last 10 years. Now there are a lot of investors and a lot of VCs, etc. Still, I think um, it is still a challenge for migrants to actually find investment. And I find it actually, I speak to a lot of migrants who are either wanting to start a startup or started a startup already and now trying to find funding. But 2021 was one of the luckiest years that we managed to exit, and I decided then to take some of that funding and actually invest back into the community in different projects, etc. And yeah, and I do continue to work with the company that acquired our company, and I would say that I'm one of the lucky ones, to be honest. Yeah.
Wow, you've had quite a journey, and it's interesting that you and I didn't bump into each other somewhere along the way in New Zealand because we were there around the same time.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
an
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
So now that you are on the other side of all of this, can you elaborate on your personal investment thesis? How does it guide your decision-making process when evaluating potential investment opportunities?
Okay, so thanks for the question. And I'm not a big investor, and obviously, I didn't make tens of millions or billions to invest in large amounts, right? But I think I am in a decent position to invest in very early stage startups. So I look at very early stage startups. The reason I look at very early stage startup is that's where you can actually help them the most in terms of mentoring, guiding, and also in terms of funding requirements. So I do look at technology startup first. Having said that, I also look at startups that are more sustainable, right? Startups who are actually doing things that's going to be sustainable, for example, like sustainable farming and renewable energy and things like that are some of the things that I have high interest in as well. Obviously, they need significant amount of funding, but the good thing happened was with my exit, etc. I also now managed to have a network of investors that I can connect with. I guess it's when you have that kind of success, people don't really want to talk about your failures, right? A lot of these people who have become successful, they have had a lot of failures, but once you had a success, there'll be a lot of others wanting to help you as well, right? Yeah.
That's wonderful. So, how do you balance the need for innovation with the inherent risks involved in investing in cutting edge technological projects?
So I think a lot of is gut feeling, right? A lot of is gut feeling, and also me being a technology founder, um, within the first 5-10 minutes, I can actually figure out whether this is product going to work or not, right? That's kind of a self-assessment I do. And if there is a longer term viability of that product, I'm not also looking for a short term gain, right? And some may take about 10 years to really make an exit, right? So I'm looking for the longer term. So I look at the founders as well. Are the founders committed like how I was, for example? Are they willing to go on like 2 minutes noodles and sacrifice everything to make this project a success? And if those things don't stack up, then I walk away, right? I'll give them advice on pro bono, but I'll probably walk away. Yeah.
So, given your passion for open source projects, How does this influence your investment choices? Do you prioritize projects that contribute to open source community? And if so, why?
Whether it is open source or commercial, I look at to see, are they really solving a world hunger problem, right? When I say world hunger problem, it can be in education, it can be in medical terms, or it can be any even software development, right? Are they really solving a problem, or are they going with the hype, right? So I try to narrow it down to see whether they're really solving a problem. If they're really solving a problem, I think there is massive benefits to the community, right? Because open source is something that has actually made a lot of us get what we can get today, right? Without open source, if everything was commercial, that would have been very hard for a lot of the countries like Sri Lanka, India, growing countries, even the countries in Africa, to actually, make something work, right? Because that would have been unaffordable to most of those countries, right? Hence my passion to support most open source projects.
So, would I be correct in saying that you are a social impact investor? Your real passion is to make a difference, especially in developing countries?
You could say that, yeah. I mean, the same analogy applies even to developing country, right? Even if the if the benefit is actually going to be sustainable and repeatable, they definitely will apply in developing countries, and developed countries can benefit too, right? And they can contribute, of course, right?
So, if I could take you back to that young man who was stepping into the entrepreneurial world, if you could go back and give yourself three pieces of advice based on what life has taught you up until this point, what would those three nuggets of wisdom be?
I think the first one is family. When you get into become an entrepreneur, you're young. I mean, obviously, if you're 20, 21, you may not be still married and not have a family, but you still have your other side of the family, right? So I think for me, that is very important. And the reason I'm saying that is important is you may unknowingly putting them under pressure, right? And that is that's personally, I think it's not a it's not a good thing, right? So you should look after your family. Second is your mental health. You have to look after your mental health, and a lot of the young people I see are getting depressed. Not just because that they didn't get they weren't able to raise funds, but uh, you know they can't get their project out and for resources or any other reasons, and they get so frustrated and they don't go and talk to others, right? So I tell them, I do these mentoring things at Swinburne as well. I'll tell them to go and actually talk to others, counselors, because look after your mental health, right? Yeah. And the final part is have fun, but the world doesn't really end tomorrow. So if your startup failed tomorrow, it doesn't mean that you cannot start another startup again, right?
Yes,
So those are kind of the three things that I would look back.
that's wonderful. So, when assessing potential investments, how important is the long term vision and the scalability of the project? What are the key indicators that you look for that suggest that a project has potential for sustainable growth and success?
Um, Firstly, the founders, they are not in purely to make money. I have walked away from a lot of projects. I could have made a lot of money, but money isn't the only thing, right?
Okay.
If they are driven by money, I think I would walk away, right? That's one of the things. The other thing I look at is the founders. Are they, like I said to you earlier, are they willing to take bare minimum but look after their team? Because looking after their team is highly important to me. Those ethics stack up, then I think they're in for a longer term, right? I go talk to founders today and they say they want to exit in 3 years. I ask why, right? Because they want to
Yes.
make money, because they say there were a lot of other people who had make money. And when I ask them, do you look at to see how long they've been doing the projects? They don't know. They think everyone becomes overnight millionaire, right?
Mm,
Yeah.
mm.
So
That's
those are kind of the
interesting.
things that I look at to see, is this a really a sustainable project? I think it all comes down to that ethics of the founders, right? And if the founders are ethical, that they don't look after themselves first, but they do have to look after themselves, but they do look after the others in the team, and they come second. But they, of course, look after their things like their mental health and their family, etc. That's important, right? Because at the end of the day, we live here because our family, our friends, etc. Right? No matter how much money we can make, right?
That's so true. So now if I teleport you into the future as my final question, you're now 90 years old and you're sitting on the porch surrounded by your children, in your rocking chair, your grandchildren, whoever's going to be with you towards the end. Based on how you're living your life and the impact you want to make, if you had an opportunity to teleport into the future to have a conversation with this wise man, what would you say to him based on how you're living your life right now?
I would ask him how many people that you had helped that's gone and multiplied that many times, right? So my idea was to build the startups, help the team members, and they go build other things that can help, right? For example, the platformer, when we exited out, we made everyone in the team in Sri Lanka debt free, right? And not only they're debt free, they're actually quite rich to go and actually invest in other projects, and which they're doing, which is something that I can see to honestly close to my heart. And because that multiplication is something you can't do it by yourself, right?
Yeah.
So I would ask him that question. Yeah.
I love that. I like to ask that question because a lot of people don't realize that wise man is already here. He's already in you and he's already guiding you, which is why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it really gives people a sense of purpose. Why are we doing what we're doing? How are we going to leave the better place than we found it?
100%. 100%. I'm not sure whether I will live to 90, but if I do live to 90.
With technology, we'll probably live to 120.
Oh, geez.
Thank
As
you.
as far as I'm not going to be a burden to anyone, then that's fine. But if I'm going to be a burden, then I don't want to.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for this interview. It's an absolute pleasure to have met you, and very, very
Thank you.
inspiring.
Likewise.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in today. The Diversity Connector is bringing people from diverse backgrounds, sharing their lives, their experiences, and their knowledge. So tune in again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing person. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And bye for now. Thanks again for the interview.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap, everybody, on today's episode of the Diversity Connector podcast. Thank you for tuning in and being part of our vibrant and global conversation. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a tapestry of diverse perspectives. Remember, every story you've heard today is a thread in the larger fabric of our shared humanity. So, as you step back into your world, carry these stories with you and let them inspire you to embrace and celebrate the rich diversity around us. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these inspiring stories with more listeners. Do follow us on social media by looking for the Diversity Connector podcast for more updates. Until then, keep connecting, keep listening, and keep celebrating the beauty of diversity. This is the Diversity Connector podcast signing off. Stay curious, stay open, and